but it rests upon the entirety of a global conversation to recognize and respect these works and to respect this knowledge and this heritage. And so, for all the different cultures I see here today, I want to thank you for coming to contribute to this conversation, because it's the first of many. And the numbers are low here first, but they always say the peak of a movement is always the skinniest. And so, once it grows, it will become more linear. And so we're at the forefront of a new pioneership of learning about Coast Salish culture and speaking about it under these terms. So I want to thank you all for coming here to share this journey with us here at the David Lamb campus. And I obviously want to thank Douglas College and all the contributors to this project. And so I want to welcome here an elected councillor for the Coquitlam First Nation to welcome you to the territory, my good cousin and brother, Ed Hall.
Thank you, Ronnie. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. Thank you much for being here. Ishwell Talsqui Skaphalem. Skaphalem is my traditional name, and it is given to me by an elder of the Stalo First Nations territories of the river here. And my first name is Ed Hall, and I'm elected councillor here in Coquitlam First Nation, whose territory this is on, and I'm really glad to be honored and co-sharing some of the territories right along the edge lines here with Tsleil-Waututh, and it is a very, very vast, rich in culture and also multicultural, as festivals do indicate that. And I've lived in this area now for about the last 20 years. I wasn't really raised here in Coquitlam, but I've lived in the Fraser Valley, smaller towns, and I've been up in Vancouver Island, and I've been as far away as Ontario, and just lived in different geographical places, and work experience and learning, teachings, and whatnot. And yeah, I'm actually part of, there's 4 generations here now in my community, and we've actually been going through a lot of overhaul. It's been getting fixed up really nicely, and I too am still learning about the histories of the area, because there's just thousands and thousands of years of it, and we have a lot of research ongoing all the time. And I just want to be able to say welcome to Coquitlam, and also I'd like to pay a special thanks to all of the contributors, the participants, the organizers, the volunteers, and just a host of people. The list just goes on. There's a lot of time and effort that has been put into this, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing it all unfold. And I just want to say thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
Another great contributor to this project was the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. They've been very instrumental in bringing this work forward. So we have here to welcome you as well, elected councillor Charlene Allen.
Heitzlaka Siam CIS, Simtalat Konasqui, Deletzen at Tsleil-Waututh, Stalo Taman. Hello everyone, good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today to celebrate our Coast Salish culture. And I just want to raise my hands to the Coquitlam First Nation for inviting us and hosting us in your territory, in your beautiful traditional territories. And thank you to Douglas College for hosting as well as the city of Coquitlam. I have really good feelings in my heart to be here today, and it just lifts my heart up so high to be a part of this type of work within our territory, to share a little bit of who we are and where you're situated in our territory. I told you in my language, my ancestral name is Simtalat, which I share with my grandmother, and then I'm from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, as well as Chiam in the Stalo. My father's from Stalo territory. The work that we do with Sacred Trust at Tsleil-Waututh is holding up high the rules and the regulations that are deeply rooted in our heart, that connects us to the land, and following that through with our stewardship over the land, and all the work that we do, whether it's economic, whether it's cultural, whether it's educational. We hold those laws up high, and just sharing that a little bit, and the connection with what we do at Tsleil-Waututh and the work that will be here for the next couple of days is a great connection, and it's a great space to have these conversations. And I'm so happy to be a part of it. And I too would like to welcome everybody and enjoy your day, your time here in your day.
Thank you, Sharon. Douglas College has been very gracious in having us host this event here, and of course, the feature of this dialogue of how do we have reconciliation through academics. It's been really great to have Douglas College on our side. And so also here to present to you today is Dave Seaweed, who is the Aboriginal Coordinator here at Douglas College.
Hi, I'd like to welcome you. First, I'd like to thank the Traditional Territory Association for coming out and hosting us as well, the Coast Salish people. I had about a 20-minute thing all set up to speak on, but we started falling behind a bit, so you get the 3-minute version. One of the things that we do at Douglas College is we have a lot of support from our institution. In the 2010 5-year strategic plan, they had something that was called Aboriginal Initiatives, and they wanted to make sure that they supported the Aboriginal students' retention, recruitment, and transitions to keep Aboriginal students at Douglas College. The last time that they did the numbers with institutional research is 2013, the year 2013, and we had, the report said we had 917 Aboriginal students at Douglas College, which is just amazing considering where their backgrounds are from and where they come and what level of academia they're at. One of the great things about the ministry, the government right now for the province, is each school district area in the K-12 has enhancement agreements. And those enhancement agreements are working with the post-secondary institutions and the K-12 system to make sure that we keep, hold, and retain Aboriginal students. From our New Westminster numbers, before they had the enhancement agreement, before we met and started to meet, from New Westminster High School, out of the 100% of Aboriginal students that started school in grade 8, only 18% graduated, which is just a horrible number. So one of the key things that we do with the communities, with the K-12 system, with the youth workers, is try to make sure that we maintain and hold and strengthen the numbers of Aboriginal students. We do that a lot at Douglas College. We work really hard. I work at the Westminster campus. I do cultural awareness. It's never ending. Everything that we do counseling, we do academic advising, we do everything. Tanya is our Aboriginal student advisor, and works out of this campus and does an amazing job as well, because a lot of times all we're looking at is making sure that the students have an ear, so someone can come in and just sit down and dump it all out for a while. The other cool thing, and I'll close on this, is we're in a process, the senior management team at the college in the budget, this budget cycle, decided that something we've been working on is trying to get an elder in residence program. One of the key things that I'm ashamed and embarrassed about is that we have not had enough contact with elders. And we need that to make sure that we grow as an institution. So for the time being, what the president did and senior management, and I didn't even put a proposal in, was gave us some one-time only money to start up an elder program where we can have elders come in at this campus at various times just to sit and center, and at the New Westminster campus, and we can grow with those relations. So it's one of the key things, and once again, as I mentioned, we're supported by our institution. So I'm very proud and honored to be surrounded by people that work hard on helping out to make this festival happen from Douglas College. Hazel and Jennifer from up in the foundation, Bill from anthropology, and I got Andrew to come up today just to be my lackey, so anything I need, he just runs off and gets it. But I hope that you learn a lot. I hope that we grow together as Aboriginal people, and I hope you have a great time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to set the mood here, a little bit of a taste of what we're in for is our respected keynote speaker. She's a distinguished author and one of our most respected, loved, I consider her a national treasure of Indigenous thought and consciousness. Our Auntie Lee Miracle.
Thank you very much. I was tuned when I was young too, and the boys thought I was a treasure. Anyhow, welcome. When I was invited to do this, I was so excited, over the moon excited, because I think back when I was a little girl, people say, "How did you come to be a writer?" And I said, "Well, the first thing I did was I was 5 and I lied to Grandpa Dad." Yeah, and I told the most ridiculous haywire lie, so it was real obvious. And he was staring at me. And we went through all these emotions. And I was thinking, why doesn't the land swallow me up and do me a big favor? But then at the end, he took a step back and he started to laugh and he said, "Good story." So he says, "Now I'm going to tell you what." So he did. And then he says, "Tell it back different but the same." And I had to first of all really listen to what he had said. I heard him. I knew the words. I could repeat them in my mind, but I had to feel my way through them. I had to know what they meant for me, backwards and forwards. And I was 5. You can't imagine the sweating I was doing, staring at him. But I tried really hard to make up a story. We played that game over and over again, and I realized that's how I'm going to teach. That's how I'm going to teach my children. It's how I'm going to raise them. And Columba Bob is one of Canada's leading playwrights. She's got twice as many plays as the boys do. She just doesn't publish them. She puts them on a stage where they belong. And she drags children with her. So there, she's my daughter. And that's what I want for our nation. When I worked in the archives, everything was art. Even the needles they made the nets with were carved. And all of that disappeared. All of our treasures inside our homes disappeared. All of our dogs that we made those beautiful blankets with disappeared. And for a long time we were wandering in this lost sensibility. But my grandpa said they wouldn't let us sing our songs, so I picked up a bass fiddle and we made a band and we sang anyway. We kept on singing, we kept on telling stories. The stories changed, but our desire to be these amazing, artistic, creative, make it happen kind of people didn't. It didn't change. What we did might have changed, but when people say you lost your culture, I say, "You fool, it wasn't in a shoebox under the bed. You're telling me a story." That's who we are, Seattle. That's who we are. And we know how to make that story become reality. I said I was going to be a great literary artist when I was 6. I told my grandpa. And I'm going to tell those same stories. Only I'm going to put them in a book. And he says, "Good, because you'll make a lot of money don't you ever lie to me again. Thank you very much. That's where we're going.
I find that, as a 36-year-old Coast Salish Statlian Uplakatmak man coming from Coquitlam, I look back to the history, and the history really goes back to my grandfathers. Because at the time, the Eurocentric views were that patriarchy was put into the heads of the families. But now, as a 36-year-old man, I understand that being a man, being a protector, is being a representative of long matriarchies. And so I'm really happy to be able to stand here with you and to present and to have our elders here and to bring this work together. Like I said, the crowd is small, but I'm hoping that next year we have every auntie and grandmother in here to teach us all. And so I really thank you all for coming to support this work. And I guess we'll move into the first session. Yeah, all right. Thank you. All right, so they usually say Indian time. We're striking that from our consciousness. We're calling it technological time. We're stuck on a colonized 1260 time frequency. Ask any of the matriarchs in here about the real-time clock that exists for our people. Right, it's about 28 days long. It's a different frequency than the Gregorian colonized time system, so we're not going to take it too seriously. Our first session is entitled The Archaeological History of Coast Salish Territory. And so I'll introduce, do we go one at a time? Is it presentations one at a time, or is there a panel? All right, everyone, this is Bill Angelbeck. He's also a teacher here at Douglas College and also a instructor. So one at a time? Okay, great. Okay. So our first presentation is by Michael Wilson, and it's called The Archaeology of Early Sites in Coast Salish History. And for a little bit of introduction, sorry. Michael Wilson. Don't read it all? Okay, we're going to do the Coles notes, and then Michael Wilson's files in here if you want to do the deep research of his ancestry. You're going to tell us who your grandmother is before you start, right? Okay, great. Michael C. Wilson received his PhD in archaeology from the University of Calgary in 1981. A former Woodrow Wilson Scholar, Isaac Walton Killam Doctoral Fellow, and Shirk Canada Research Fellow. He recently retired from Douglas College, where he was the chair of the Depth of Earth and Environmental Sciences. I'm going to stop there and give the microphone over to Michael Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a PowerPoint? Oh, you good? Okay, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm very, very grateful to be welcomed onto Coquitlam lands and to be able to participate in this colloquium today. I was actually born in England, and so my family, since I have to talk about my grandmother, my family history comes by oral tradition, because my father's people were Scots. They were Highland Scots. And, now we're doing something else technologically here.
Quick. There we go.
Tasting.
Does that work? Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. My father's people were... there we go.
Yeah, both. Please, once for recording. Yeah.
Once for recording. Oh.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Fascinating, Captain. You're going to get me in stereo, apparently. Anyway, my father's people were Highland Scots, and they were cleared out of the Highlands by English overlords. In the early 1800s, they were burned out of their houses and moved to the lowlands of Scotland, to Fife. And where my great-great-grandfather actually made golf clubs. But he was a blacksmith. Anyway, at the time they were cleared out of the islands, they were the Gunn clan, by the way, G-U-N-N, Gunn from Gunnar, from Gunny, for they were Norse. But when they were cleared out of the Highlands, an English statesman said that these people were nothing more than American Aborigines. And that's on record, actually, in the British Parliament. And I take that as a deep and profound compliment. Anyway, by some strange fate, I've ended up here. And I want to be talking to you about some of the earliest evidence we have for people here in this territory. The presentation itself is, well, it sounds kind of technical, and I want to talk about megafauna, land megafauna. Megafauna is kind of a Latinized version of the words big furry animals. Although furry isn't in there, but big animals anyway. And I have a bit of a vision problem, so I like to work with very big things that I can actually see. So I gravitated to working with buffalo and mammoths and things like that, rather than stuff you have to look at under a microscope. First, the headlines. I want to give some of the main points here. First of all, I'll go through them very quickly. But the fact that we now know that there were a lot of these large furry animals that were here immediately after the retreat of ice in this area, in the Salish Sea, Olympic Peninsula region. And I say in the Salish Sea because these animals were on islands as well as on the mainland. So in means something more there. But there's also evidence of their hunting by humans. Okay, so go back 14,000 calendar years here. This is not radiocarbon years, but calendar years. We're talking about evidence for their hunting by humans. There were giant bison in this area, buffalo. Isn't it cool? I love it. I grew up on the plains here in Calgary, and there were buffalo all around us. But I love buffalo, but they followed me here anyway. But they survived for a couple of thousand years, actually, and people were interacting with them. This leads me then to suggest that an idea that people came down the coast as somehow specialized coastal people, already with a very specialized coastal adaptation, may not actually be realistic. So we want to investigate that a little bit. Also, I wanted to point out their taphonomy that I'll talk about a little bit. Taphonomy is simply what happens to fossils in their history. This is a region where bones are not really nicely preserved. Forest soils are acidic. And so we're only finding these remains in a few very specific places. And it's been very difficult for us to see this story until quite recently. But, and finally, I want to also talk about the sort of environmental conditions that might have allowed people and animals to move around a little bit more easily than you would think. So I want to start by giving credit to other people, because what I'm talking about here is going to involve a great deal more than my own efforts. Steve Kennedy, Randall Schalk, Bob Mierendorf, Carl Gustafson, and Dan Miat, we've all worked in various phases on this, on the American side, because we've been working down in the San Juan Islands and on the Olympic Peninsula. And up here in British Columbia, I've been working with Richard Hebda and Grant Keddy over at the BC Museum. All of these people have made substantial contributions, and I maybe should have listed them all as co-authors, but then they would have to suffer for anything that I say in terms of mistakes that I make. Let's go back to British Columbia between 19,000 and 15,000 years ago and realize that this area was covered by ice. Right where we sit now, there were 2 kilometers of ice in this area. Very, very different world at that time. The ice extended out to tidewater glaciers. It went down as far south as the Seattle to Olympia area in the Puget Sound. In fact, Puget Sound is in part a depression because it was scoured by ice. When the ice retreated, the results of that were felt then. So in the lower right-hand corner there, you see a picture of what it might have looked like in this area at that time, or toward the close of that time. Except that that photograph was taken in Greenland from on one of our flights across southern Greenland. Okay, well, what was here in terms of these large furry animals? And I'm not being facetious when I say large furry animals, by the way. I just love that term. It's something that I've studied for a long time. And so we had giant buffalo. These kind of longer horn, bigger than modern buffalo. They were big bodied things. There's even a large deer from one of our sites, although we don't know much about it. Mountain goat, which were present on Vancouver Island, are not present there today. We had mastodon, guys with tusks down on the Olympic Peninsula. Jefferson's ground sloth on Orcas Island. Ooh, that's cool. Giant short-faced bear on San Juan Island. Giant short-faced bear, bigger than a Kodiak bear. Black bear and brown bear as well on Vancouver Island. Mammoths were here, by the way. Mammoths and mastodons a little bit different. Mammoths were here before the last ice advance. When the ice retreated, mammoths didn't seem to move back north, although they were present further to the south. It's just that they were probably a bit slow in coming back, and they didn't get here again. Anyway, evidence for hunting. Well, this is really cool. At the Manus Mastodon site in Sequim on the Olympic Peninsula, and you can see the map there, and you can see where the Manus site is located. Let there be light. I'm a little late. Anyway, the date on this particular mammoth is nearly 14,000 years ago. By radiocarbon, that's 12,000 radiocarbon years, but 14,000 years ago. And as you see in the lower left, the picture there is of the head of a rib from the middle of the back, and in that rib is sticking a bone projectile point. So the images that you see there, you've got a picture of the rib. In the foursome of pictures there, upper left is a picture of the rib itself with the spike sticking out of it. On the upper right, you see a CAT scan image of that bone projectile point sticking in the bone, and you see an X-ray sort of cross-sectional image in the lower left. That is evidence that somebody stuck a projectile in this animal. The animal did not die, by the way, necessarily from this blow, although there's no real evidence of healing around that impact. But it's tantalizing evidence of something going on. And mastodons, as you see right here, were big tusked proboscideans. In that image there's a mammoth in the background, an African elephant in the middle ground, and a mastodon in the foreground. Mastodons were pretty cool things. And
it was so much nicer to see these slides with the lights low.
yeah, can we adjust? I don't know, somebody was adjusting the lights, so I agree with you. If we could maybe continue experimenting with it. There you go. Does that work for everybody? Works for you? Good, okay. Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much for that. You can see the tusks of this individual, and in the lower right, you can see that a lot of the material at this site was highly fragmented as well. I'm not going to claim that this is all the result of butchering because there are geological processes as well. But this was a fairly complete skeleton of this animal, coupled with the evidence of that impact. At Ayer Pond, on Orcas Island, which is in the San Juans, and again, you can see that up in the map there. There's a bison, which is also dated just under 14,000 years ago. And that bison has, and I don't have a pointer, but anyway, the legs that you see there are basically just the ankles on down, and you've got the lower ends of the two tibiae, the two shin bones, broken off by blows from a butchering tool. In other words, this is an animal that's been significantly butchered. The upper and lower images there are two forelimb bones from two different buffalo from these islands. The lower one has been reassembled from smashed fragments. Again, it was broken up by butchering blows. And in fact, the humerus, the upper bone of the forearm, is right here in the lower right, and most of that bone is broken away. This is an animal that was butchered by people. Not only is there evidence at these sites, but at the mastodon site, there's more than just the mastodon. There's also buffalo material there, and it's a bit younger than the mastodon. In other words, people were still occupying that site, animals were still there, but the buffalo themselves have cut marks on them. Not only have the bones been smashed, but the upper part of that, where the arrow is, you can see all these oblique cut marks that indicate not only the primary butchering, but the processing as well. And you can see additional cut marks on this lower jaw. Again, up in the upper part there, you can see various tool marks on this specimen. This is an animal that is a bit younger. It's in around 13,000 years old, but people were here hunting these animals. We also know that there were Clovis people in this region. Now, they're conventional in terms of archaeology. They're not as wild a claim as these ones I've just made, but about 13,000 years ago, Clovis people were making these large stone projectile points, and surface finds are indicated in red on that map. They're widespread through the area. You notice that Ayr Pond and Manus are there as well. They're pre-Clovis in age. Wenatchee is a Clovis site. And up in Stave Lake area, there are a number of ancient projectile points that are probably of comparable antiquity. What else was there? Well, we got a partial skeleton of a ground sloth from Morcus Island, and we just got a date on it, and the date on it is almost exactly the same as Clovis dates. A little under, in fact, around 12,900 years ago. So we know that overlapping the really good documented time of people in this area that nobody argues about, we've got ground sloths in this area too. So there was significant contact between early people and these animals. And to me, these early people were explorers. They weren't just wandering here. A Sami, that is, if you know of the people in northern Finland, the Sami, the reindeer herders, a Sami elder said to anthropologist, is it Thomas Paine? Paine is his last name anyway, said, tell them we don't just wander. And these people were not just wandering. These people were explorers. They were moving through this area, exploring the land, just as we talk about historic explorers from Europe. In fact, I've been watching an ad on television all about the Arctic. How many of you have seen this Government of Canada ad saying when Franklin first came in contact with the indigenous people of the Arctic, he was lost, right? And subsequently, all these people came from Europe to embark upon, as this ad says on TV, an unprecedented act of exploration. Now, wait a minute. There were already people in the Arctic occupying that area, having explored that area. There was nothing unprecedented about that exploration. And I get angry every time I see that on television. Anyway, Kennewick Man, oh thank God, Kennewick Man no longer looks like Jean-Luc Picard. We now know, thanks to DNA studies, isn't it wonderful science can actually do something useful? A lot of people resisted this for fears maybe that, oh my God, maybe some of these people are right, maybe it's European and we don't really want to know that. Thank heaven. We now know that Kennewick Man, who was a bit younger than what we're talking about here, was in fact of ultimate Asiatic origin, had nothing to do with Europeans, and in fact is closely related to the modern Colville people. And probably a lot of the interior Salish people, by the way, focusing on Colville just focuses on the availability of the DNA sample. So recently, Duncan McLaren has found footprints that just got in the news here, dating to perhaps 13,000 or more years ago, based on a nearby hearth that was dated, by the way. And so there's still work that Duncan is doing here to clarify the relationships. But there's a lot of evidence coming up for early human presence in this area as these people were exploring the land. Okay, I'm just going to jump over a couple of things here. The buffalo themselves are interesting to me because they have somewhat short horns for the buffalo of their age. and they seem to show an island effect. They've been on the island for quite a while. We've got them from Victoria. There's part of a buffalo horn, just the base of a horn from downtown Victoria, and another one from on Orcas Island. But this raises the question, all of this stuff. Some people have suggested a kind of kelp highway, a surf model, that early explorers coming into this area were moving down the coast because they had a very specialized, already developed, specialized coastal adaptation. They really knew how to intensively exploit coastal resources. Great idea, but one of the problems is we're seeing that there's actually quite a lot of evidence for big animals along some of these routes as well. And of course, that's not necessarily the case for the entire coast. But we see evidence of large animals, certainly large bears and so forth, on Haida Gwaii as well. And probably they're more widespread than we would think. The problem is these animals, these bones don't get well preserved because of the acidic soils. So I'm suggesting it isn't really just a surf model. I'm going to say it's a surf and turf model, and I'm adding in the turf here. We're adding in these megafauna, these big animals, and suggesting that early people in this area did a lot more big game hunting than we've thought. It's also a bit puzzling, you see, if there were specialized coastal peoples, once they were in this area, why did it take several thousand years before shell middens started to accumulate? Something was happening later on. For a few thousand years, there just isn't much in the way of shell midden records. So the actual evidence isn't consistent with this idea of very specialized coastal people arriving at the first instant. Just to point out that the habitat did support large bears. Arctodus, the giant short-faced bear, probably bigger than this diagram actually suggests. So, my God, that looks like the Trivago man from TV. The same pose, you know? But anyway, and I just took a picture of a bear up in Johns Hopkins Inlet when I was up there. I took a picture of a modern brown bear doing its job in a recently deglaciated landscape. Yeah. Okay, so what we do know is that people moved, or what we do suggest is that people moved down the coast. The intriguing thing is that glaciers were actually retreating in Alaska at the same time as glaciers were still expanding in the south. So even at the height of the last glaciation, there may have been opportunities to move down the west coast. It wasn't just a question of before or after glaciation, and that chronology needs to be worked with quite a bit. Of course, there were big sea mammals as well, and I want to emphasize that. But where we're finding the bones, just to point out the problem we have, we don't find them in any areas where forests have developed. So we're finding them in wetlands where the bones can be preserved because there are glacial deposits with marine shells, and the shells buffer the acidity of the soil. So overlying them in these bogs, we're actually finding the bones. And it's a very specific place, and unfortunately, it's not the best place for people to camp, nor was it the favorite place for these animals to live. It's just the only place their bones could have been preserved. And so we're seeing a very small fragment of a much, much larger story. And I'm just going to jump back to this and point out also that if you go to Alaska today and into Cook Inlet, you will see what happens when fresh water overrides seawater, as would have been the case in this area too. And every winter in Cook Inlet, they develop pack ice. They develop, in other words, an ice shelf, and that would facilitate movement from one place to another over water. So it isn't just a question of whether people have boats or not. I wish I could just say that, oh yes, here's good evidence. People are getting to the islands. Yes, they must have had a boat technology, and I love the idea of Umiak's technology, but I can't demonstrate it with my information, so I've got to be careful. That, by the way, is a gas platform in the lower right there. It's not an animal on the ice. That is a gas drilling platform in Cook Inlet, and those guys are very, very worried about pack ice. It's major stuff. So, just a few ideas then about what might be coming to us in the future, the kind of information we'll be coming up with. And as glaciers, maybe they'll advance again on Victoria. But anyway, thank you very much.
Sorry.
So we got about 5 minutes for our next presentation, and I wonder if there's any questions off the top here while we get set up for Terrence Clark. No questions means you guys must. Oh, here we go.
When you mentioned, do we need that? No. When you mentioned that area that allowed for preservation, do you think that was deliberate?
Oh, yeah, so the question is it possible deliberate? Is it the result of the fact that those bones are in these wetland areas, is it deliberate? And that's an important issue. Why or how did they get there? The stuff at Ayr Pond, this buffalo, it's really interesting. It's a partial skeleton. It's a skull plus the lower limb bones and a few other bits and pieces. And you almost get the impression that somebody kind of dumped them there, right? It's the leftover stuff. The good parts are gone. They're somewhere else. So maybe that represents cultural disposal. Being scientists were kind of obnoxious in having to come up with all sorts of alternative ideas. And one possibility is that this was sitting on the ice seasonally, and the ice melted and it just went down into the wetland. Gotta be careful. But that's a very important thing that we're kind of wondering about. Is there a practice of disposal? And we've tried to find a campsite nearby. We've actually done some excavations. Found a couple of tantalizing pieces of stone flakes, and that's about it so far, and a much, much younger heart. But we have not given up. The bottom line is just keep on looking, and we will. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for sharing. I just had a question. It was said that Ken McMahon was of Asiatic origin, but it also said that is closely related to the Colville. So does that insinuate that the Colville people are of Asiatic origin?
Well, that's the DNA implication that the relatedness, the strongest relatedness would be with sort of generalized Asiatic populations and not with European populations, in other words. I mean, some Colville have suggested that Native people were created by the Creator in North America. I can't counter that because that's not the realm of science. And in fact, Colville elders went to Denmark, to Svante Pavo's lab, and were present throughout the DNA work, and are fascinated actually and positive about these results. But beyond that, I don't want to get involved in there's a sort of value-laden political argument as well, and I'm not schooled enough to talk about it. I really don't. I would say something useless. So, and I'll try to say what I can understand, but the relatedness with the Colville was the important thing, more than anything else. And it's a very, I think it's going to have a profound value for people in the area, because they can say, look, yes, our people have been in this area for 9,000 years, at least, and then probably more. But now we can demonstrate it. Nobody will argue with this. So.
I just want to ask my young nephew there, Hubert, this is part of the
again, of some of these animals, the buffalo, for example, that they actually moved both ways across the Bering Land Bridge. That there was a movement into North America, there was also a movement back, and so people could have gone in both directions as well. And that's a very important thing to think about. Yeah.
I was just going to say the same thing my auntie said, but she said it way more eloquent than I did. I think, well, I really appreciated your sharing what the Sami elder had said, that, you know, don't look at us as wanderers. So I would suggest whatever science would look at DNA of folks is, don't look at North American indigenous peoples as coming from somewhere else. We were here. Our creation stories, our elders, our history has been passed down since time out of mind. We have been here. So it's us going that way.
I have nothing useful to say in that regard. No, I mean, I'm honest. I think back to the words of Josephine Koshu, actually, who was a person of great importance to me, Pete Cunningham, who at a conference like this was asked to make a comment, and she said, I am such a small person. How could I possibly make a meaningful contribution? And in some ways, I feel the same way. You know, I am such a small person. How could I make a meaningful contribution? So I describe what I have and hope that it will contribute to something. And that's the spirit in which I want to present it. In terms of Kennewick, I'm really quoting what the people published on it, and because I haven't worked on it myself, so all I can do is deliver what others have said. But I'm not passing the buck either. I just have nothing from my own work that would bear upon that any further. Okay.
But that was a very good thing to point out about Alaska. And
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very evident that in this work that, you know, the idea of this colloquium is that, you know, everybody has a puzzle piece, right? Everyone's research comes, and once we put those puzzle pieces on the table, I'm sure that we'll start to see more of the image that we're looking for, a position for Coast Salish culture. So thank you all for that, for contributing to that conversation. Our next presenter is Terrence Clark. His presentation is from the Canadian Museum of History. His presentation is called The Last 5 Years of the Shishal Archaeological Research Project. I have this page open, sorry, Terry. Terrence Clark is curator of the Western Archaeology at the Canadian Museum of Civilization in Gatineau, Quebec. He has extensive archaeological field experience across the Northwest Coast, Plateau, and Western subarctic culture areas. And he is also the author of Rewriting Marpole, The Path to Cultural Complexity in the Gulf of Georgia, which is available through the University of Ottawa Press 2013. And so while he's getting mic'd up here, I'll read a little bit more. His current research projects focus on the rise of intensive shellfishing, the development of social complexity, contact period archaeology, and statistical methods. And to give us a presentation here, we'll welcome Terrence Clark. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be back in Coquitlam territory. It's been a few years. Thank you very much to our hosts for having us here. I think everyone's going to get a lot out of today. Today I'm going to talk about the Shishal Archaeological Research Project, and this is a collaboration of the Canadian Museum of History, the University of Toronto, and the Shishal Nation. The project began in 2008 under the direction of Gary Copeland at the University of Toronto, and I became the director in 2011. And since then, we've been having wonderful field seasons. We've recorded almost 200 archaeological sites, newly discovered sites within the territory. We have excavated at 7 sites. We have 3 years of an Aboriginal training program where we train Shishal youth in archaeology and heritage stewardship, and we've produced 3 master's students who have completed and 1 PhD. Here's a map of the territory. Our survey, if I had a pointer, I would just point out that there are 2 inlets, Salmon Inlet and Narrows Inlet. We've surveyed those as part of master's projects, and the stars just indicate the villages and campsites that we have excavated in previous years. The project is really about collaboration, and we don't just mean at the face of it, we mean deep collaboration. So this isn't just having Chief and Council out to site, which we do all the time. Here's Chief Calvin Cragen and Sid Quinn from the band. We're just talking about some of the work we're doing this year. It means that we meet constantly with Chief and Council, with elders, with community members, and we talk about not just the work that we're doing, but the work we're going to do. What research questions are of value or of importance to the nation, as well as the kind of questions that academics want to deal with. But this is a project where everyone gets a say, and for the last several years, the sites that we've chosen are the sites that the nation wants us to be at. A big part of this is the Aboriginal training program, and so we've run this for 3 years. We've had almost 20 students come through high school age and a bit older, and we teach about archaeology, about heritage stewardship, the importance of the history beneath their feet. And high school age kids are sometimes difficult to get through to. There's a lot of distractions going on. And so, you know, the importance of their territory is not always front and center. And the best thing we can do is get them out, let them find something, and have elders come out and talk to them about the importance of sites, the importance of the culture, and it completely changes the dynamic. And so when we're doing it, you know, there's people listening to their iPods and not necessarily paying attention. But when we get the elders out on site, everything changes, and it's fantastic. And I'm really happy that we also have university students there. And they can see this, and they get it. So the project is really about the collaboration. So our university students go back to Toronto, or wherever they're from, and take a bit of that, and they understand the importance of culture and heritage, as well as passing it on to future generations. So here's Gary Copeland, just talking to our crew. In previous years, we've documented some absolutely amazing sites. One of them is internationally significant. This site is near the mouth of Salmon Inlet and contains the most elaborate burials in prehistoric Canada. And so here we have one burial. I'm not showing any human remains, don't worry. That has over 350,000 stone beads associated with it. And so this is far beyond, an order of magnitude beyond any that has been previously known in Canada. And with the blessing and the encouragement of the Shishal Nation, we actually did a couple years of work at this site to try to find out who these people were and what made them so special. And what we found is absolutely amazing, that these ancient Shishal chiefs lived 4,000 years ago. And this destroys most of our current models of how wealth and power came together. And I'm also very happy that this work was recognized by the BC government, and the largest buffer ever granted to an archaeological site in the province is this site. No development will take place within 1 kilometer of this site, which is fantastic. It's also important to note that there was a lot of logging tape close to the site. And so crews went out and tore that tape down. Those cut blocks are not going to be cut. Also, we found, as you'd expect, the people that lived there were very important chiefs, very wealthy, influential, very ceremonially important. And so we found lots of ochre, lots of evidence of ceremony. Here we have some very large points, just caked in ochre. But our collaboration goes beyond that. It's not just field work. We're very happy to work with the Thames Museum in Sechelt. It's a small museum. You could fit 6 of them in this room. But it's really important to us that we work with them. So I work at the biggest museum in the country, and we have an equal partnership with a small local museum. We provide training. We actually had 2 interns, workers at Thameswea, come to our museum in Ottawa for 3 weeks and get specialized training in all aspects of museology. We continue to do this while we're here, and we work on exhibitions, which I'll talk about in a second. So here we've got Karina Julius, who's just up there. Sorry, Karina, for pointing out. And Erica Vader, who are the interns that came to Ottawa. And this is Jameson Brand, who runs the Aboriginal Training Program and Museum Practices. So this program has run now for 25 years. It's the #1 way that Aboriginal people in Canada get trained in museum practices. And so many cultural centres across the country, our graduates end up there. These are the main way that we can help spread the message of, or enable communities to better tell their own stories. Here we just have another picture. But beyond that, we're embarking on a new project with the nation and the Thameswea Museum, and it revolves around the New Canada History Hall. And so many of you may know, or may not, that our main hall, our largest gallery, is now demolished, and we're building a new national narrative, 50,000 square feet on Canadian history. And so in the media, everyone thinks that this is a Harper agenda and that we're going to completely remove Aboriginal people from the equation. In fact, that's not true at all. The old hall, history started with the Vikings. The new hall is going to actually have a very large gallery that starts with Aboriginal people. And it's going to start with the stories of Aboriginal people and where they came from. And so I think the first thing they'll see when they come in the hall is the Haida story of Raven and the First Men. After we tell some of these stories, we'll get into the science and talk about, just like Michael did, about glaciers and megafauna, and we'll continue through. What's really interesting is that throughout the hall, we're trying to focus on people. We want when visitors come through, we want them to encounter people. And that's a lot harder to do in prehistory. But luckily, our work at the 9 Mile site that I just talked about gives us an opportunity for our visitors to meet the ancient Shuswap chiefs. So we're working with Thameswea Museum and actually reconstructing the faces of the ancient chiefs that were there. And the very first faces that you see in the New Canada History Hall will be Shuswap. So it starts with an expert reconstructing the face. So here's a reconstruction that this artist did of Henry IV. It was just one that I could find. But you can see that they're very realistic, they're very accurate. And throughout this process, we'll meet with elders from the community. We'll make sure that everyone's comfortable, that this is accurate and respectful portrayal. And the best part, I think, is that although we're the biggest museum, we have over 1 million visitors a year, whatever we create, the exact same display will be at the Thameswea Museum. We'll create 2 of them, we'll write the text together, we'll do the design together. This is a collaboration from start to finish. This is not me writing it, this is us writing it together. And the exact same display will be just up the road in Sechelt. Here at this museum, that has the famous seashell image, there'll be a place in the corner for our display. Another thing that we do every time we're out is have Archaeology Day, and this is really just an open house for the community to come out. We have our students come and talk to their families. They tell their parents and their aunties and uncles what they did that summer. They get to talk about the artifacts that they found, explain them. I try to not say a word, just step into the background and let them talk about their own culture. It gives us the opportunity to talk to the broader community. We love having community members out to site, but not everyone can come out. And so this is an opportunity for everyone in the community to know what we're doing, as well as it gives everyone an opportunity to talk to us about the future. So they can say, I had a hunting cabin up the inlet. Did you ever think about going up there? And so we get all sorts of ideas about where to go next from the community. Right now, we're working on the next 5 years of the project. We've been talking to the nation and a number of other university partners. We're always looking to grow, to bring more expertise to bear on the region. And of course, we're consulting with the community. So we've met with elders to talk about where they'd like to go next and how archaeology can benefit the nation. This can't be a one-sided opportunity for academics to come and mine data that no longer works. We want to answer questions that are relevant. There are tons of sites, and it's not up to me to pick which ones we go to. I want it to mean something, and so that's our focus. Thanks a lot.
I'll open it up for questions while we set up for our next presenter. Questions? And
try to use your longhouse voice if you're speaking from the back, please. Because we've got cameras here.
we would love for your contribution to be heard by our audio system. So, any questions? Everyone's got it.
Oh, we got it.
Is this a mic?
Yeah.
What's that? Is that a mic? It's a mic. Okay. You still have to use that. Okay.
I'm trying to figure out, so I worked in museums. I was a museum director for a long time for my community.
And
I have
backwards and forwards.
Community scene. So I'm trying to figure out what the purpose is of these life-size reconstructed Aboriginal people from the remains at archaeological sites. Like, what does that really do for our communities? You think of all of the money and time that it costs to do this reconstruction. You think of the means of language preservation and you know, other things that are in dire need of funds and attention amongst our people. And to think, I was stunned. I'm always stunned at kind of the weird things that happen at the Community Museum of Civilization. But that one, it seems to me like we're way beyond the life-size dioramas. And then when you go back and you're reconstructing ancestors, but in a way that makes the community comfortable, what really is the objective behind that?
The objective basically is we're focusing on individuals later in history. There's going to be a lot of dead white men here, clearly, because we have images of them. And so we wanted not to have no Aboriginal presence. We wanted people to see Aboriginal people. We think that that's important. And we work closely with the community. This is not the only Aboriginal reconstruction that we're doing. There'll be one from the Arctic as well. And again, close consultation with the community. We would not do this if there was any hesitation from the community. I think it basically, for our visitors, many of them are international. They're coming from Europe or Asia. They are not going to read a ton of stuff. They need to see things. They need it visual. They need it in their face. And this, I think, humanizes that there is an Aboriginal presence and that it goes back many, many millennia.
At the same time, we live in such a technologically advanced age where you
I think in this case, we may actually not make full 3D reproductions. They may be digital, so it would be a picture like that on a screen, a video monitor, and beside that, we actually have another video monitor with contemporary Shell people talking about the importance of their history, their connection to the land. And so the reason that we even dug at this site at all was they wanted to know what that connection was, how far back it went, and why, if this was as important as it was. And so I think for them, being on the international stage, through the lifespan of this exhibit, we'll probably have 30 million people come by and see it. And so the fact that they're going to show their ancestors and have modern elders talk about the importance of their ancestors and the connection to the land, I think that that's why they have embraced it.
Interesting, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I just want to add something to what you say, and what she's saying, and I think she's making a really valid point that we should look to in the future. That first of all, right now, he's talking about the science of reconstructing faces. And I understand you guys do the best you can, but I don't think Ken McMahon has such a full beard. I think it's very convincing. But that's just me. I think when we get more kids through master's degree and PhDs and stuff, that they can get together with arts, because there's some great things happening with artists at the Ontario Long Museum, where they're putting things on the wall and they're moving and they're old and they're new, and all kinds of things are going on like that. Technology is what you're talking about, but what you're talking about is really artistic. And the Museum of Man in Ottawa could take some examples from what's going on in the Wrong in Ontario, with Aboriginal artists getting together with archaeologists and stuff. So that's something we can look to in the future as Coast Salish people, working with guys like this.
Excellent. Yes.
Auntie, I love that we must be from the same family.
Yeah.
I was on top of what Auntie was saying, to further this young woman's question, are there any Aboriginal consultation going on with the Canadian or the reconstruction? Because I too feel like, moving beyond the diorama type of things, because it's still, even though you're trying to put a contemporary spin on it, it still feels like we're going to be in this box, and this is going to be people looking at us that, they're in the past. So if there are a lot more Aboriginal minds working with you folks on reconstructing this, then we can feel really safe that we're moving forward and we're not just putting that new spin on an old way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's absolutely a fair point. And I think in many museums, Aboriginal cultures are kind of stuck either at the beginning